The Ben Heck Show is brought to you by Element 14, the electronic design community where you can connect and collaborate with top engineers from around the world. Join now at element14.com. Hello and welcome back to the Ben Heck Show.
So, Ben, what are we doing today?
Well, back in August, we bought an Xbox One S and did a teardown of the new slim Xbox One console.
Yeah, and we took it apart and we're like, oh, we don't want to have to put this back together into like a regular Xbox, so I know we should turn it into something.
That's right. So over the course of basically the fall, I was analyzing the pieces, drawing them into the computer, and slowly designing and assembling a new Xbox One S laptop portable. So in today's episode, we're going to show you all the steps that we took to build it and then put the final touches on it, assemble it, and test it out on the show.
It's going to be so pretty.
Let's get started.
Amazing hacks.
Where are my dragons?
Inspired designs.
Oh, look, I knocked some hot glue loose.
Regrettable acting.
I want to live in a world with Star Wars again!
Each week, Element 14's The Ben Heck Show brings you innovative projects using electronics, engineering, and more.
Okay, so we have all the pieces of the Xbox One S. The major components are a Blu-ray drive, power supply, a motherboard, and a hard drive. So on the original system, they're stacked up a bit. Side view, have the motherboard there, the Blu-ray drive is on top of it, got your CPU heatsink, hard drive is behind this heatsink, and the power brick is at the rear of the unit. So what I want to do is I actually want to spread things out more, kind of like this drawing. By putting things side by side, we can make everything a lot thinner. And any screen that we add is probably going to be at least 15 or 16 inches. So if we had this as the top-down view of the original unit, we just put everything like it was in the original unit, any screen that we add is going to be much bigger than those components, at least 15 inches. So we might as well spread the components out. See if we can draw a slightly better version of this. Motherboard's about yay big. Blu-ray drive is pretty big. Power supply, and behind the motherboard we can have like the HDMI cables, the LVDS converter for the screen, and things like that. So as far as the design of the unit, like the aesthetic design, thinking we can go for a pretty thin lid that has a 15 or 16 inch LCD, and that will fit the layout of the components pretty well. You could have the Blu-ray drive right there, and then make some tasteful power buttons in front, and maybe kind of like have a engraving plastic skin around it, so the whole thing is like contiguous engraving plastic, which would look nice instead of having like rough Sintra. So this could be a lid here, and then we can skin the sides with pieces of plastic, and we can cut pieces kind of like this and then curve the edges. That should work. We did that with the Virtual Boy or the Virtual Man. So yeah, we'll start out by rewiring the components as we need to like just to make them fit. Then we'll figure out the best way to arrange them. Then we can design the casing around the way the components are arranged, and then we'll make it look nice, create some hinges, and build the screen. So yeah, we'll just take it one step at a time, but I think it'll work out well. So a while back, we did a teardown of the Xbox One S, the new slim Xbox console, and I thought it would be cool to make something of it. So I took this, and I also stuck it in my flatbed scanner, and it was like, nah, nah. Now when you scan things, it'll actually come into your program at a 1-to-1 ratio. So if you scan a 1-inch cube, bring it into AI, and draw a square around it, it'll be a 1-inch square. There is a little bit of distortion though, since the scanning head goes like this. This axis is accurate, but this axis will have a spherical distortion because of the way the lens compresses it, because the sensing element isn't this wide, it's actually like this wide, and then it's compressed, kind of like an anamorphic camera lens. So I took this into the computer and I lined up all the holes and I cross-referenced it with measurements of the actual device. Then I started cutting paper patterns with my laser. On about my 6th iteration, I think I got it pretty good. So what I do is I take the pattern, I lay it down. I also removed the USB port that was sticking out the bottom to make this as flat as possible. And I line everything up. I try to get the outer perimeters correct, but more importantly, I want to get the screw holes accurate so I can have as many, options for mounting this as possible. And also the X clamp here. It looks pretty good. I've put together everything on the Xbox One. So we have the Blu-ray drive. I've extended its power cable. I have moved the hard drive. I've put the front panel PCB at a right angle and ported out the buttons eject, bind, and power. I've moved the Wi-Fi module to a 90-degree angle, and I'm using the new short HDMI cable. Still got the original fan and the original power supply for now. I want to make sure that I haven't broken anything yet before I try my new power supply. So the existing power supply can do 10 amps at 12 volts, which probably means the system is like around 7 with overhead. So this is a 13.9 amp power supply. The reason I got a bigger one is because this will also have to run the LCD screen at 12 volts. So I put the heatsink back on with Arctic Silver, so hopefully that's good. Let's see what happens. So for the record, we never turned this thing on. We only took it apart, to paraphrase Dave Jones. This is the original controller that came with it. It should be bound to the system. I'll try hitting the power button. Ah, yes, I can get a nice facial. Oh, it made sound. That's weird. I can hear the hard drive whirring. All right, I'm gonna get the Xbox set up and make sure it's ready to go, and then we can test it out. Now that we've completed the lengthy new inbox update process, we can finally test something. I actually don't have any Xbox One games here at the shop, but I do have this audio CD that we also used when we tested the PlayStation prototype. Let's see if we can run an audio CD in this. Mostly just seeing if I hooked up the Blu-ray drive correctly. I would think this would run an audio CD. I don't think the PlayStation 4 does anymore. Oh, do I have to download an app in order to run a CD? Wow, modern consoles are awesome! Oh good, I can get the audio CD player app for free. Remember when you would just take your Nintendo cartridge and stick it into your Nintendo and push the button and it would turn on? And yeah, sometimes you had to blow on it, but it didn't take half an hour. The PlayStation 4 is no better. Whoa, what was that? Oh, launch. All right, here we go. Seems like they all work. Cool, so we know the Blu-ray drive works. The system seems to be operational. What I'm gonna do next is try it with a different power supply and also smaller fans. This was the 10 amp 12 volt power supply that came with the Xbox One S. I wanna put a bigger power supply on because we're also gonna have a screen. I mean, if this thing is 10 amps, that probably means the system is more like 7. They always have overhead, but I just want to be sure. So I got this 13.9 amp power supply, and I'm wiring it up. I cut the plug off of this power supply so we can reuse it on the system. I could have probably found a replacement plug online, but oh well. So what I'm just doing now is I have a bundle of 3 grounds and 3 positive voltages. I would have preferred to use yellow because that's the color for 12 volts, but you know, can't always get what you want, but sometimes you get what you need. So one thing I want to do here is I want to actually have different lengths to these wires. So let's do this. Let's cut this one a little short. If I took all of these wires and spliced them at the same point, there would be a big ball of splices. So what I usually do is I stagger it out, and that helps you keep everything a little smaller. See how that is there? So I'm gonna do the same thing with this. This power supply has 4 returns and 4 positive 12 volt pins, which is perfect. I can hook up the same 3 connections to the Xbox here, and then with the last 2 power, or with the last power and ground connection, I can hook that up for the screen, which will also need 12 volts. So we wouldn't have necessarily had to use 3 different wires. That's just what they had on their power supply. You can go up online and look at current carrying capacity of wires. Basically, it'll tell you based off the wire's AWG, American Wire Gauge, number, how much current it can carry safely. Again, they probably went over. It's always a good idea to think high and then double it. Oh no, we've gone from copper to aluminum wire. Should be all right. So each one of these, I'm gonna twist it up tight, then I'm gonna solder it, let it sit for a little while. You don't want the solder to be a big ball on it. You want it to actually wick into the wire. That should be good. Now the gray wire is a little thinner, so I'm gonna turn the solder bead that way so we have a more consistent thickness, and then I'm gonna slide the heat shrink tubing over it. And I always keep a lighter handy because it's the fastest way to get the heat shrink tubing. Don't have to whip out the heat gun. All right, now I'm going to continue that for the other 2 wires, and then we should be able to power the Xbox using this new larger supply. I want to replace this large fan with 2 smaller fans for my laptop. So these are 12 volt fans, just like that one. Of course, they're a lot smaller, and they only have 2 leads each. So the Xbox One fan has 4 pins on it. The first 2, this one's ground, this one's power. The next 2 are used for control. There's the sense pin, the 3rd one from the bottom. That one is the fan telling the system how fast it's moving, an RPM sensor. And the top one is the Xbox telling the fan how fast to move. So let's turn it on and see what we can See what we can find. Okay, on the scope we see the signal is running at 25 hertz, and the duty cycle, which is the percentage of time the signal is high instead of low, is 27%. So if the signal needs to cool off more, it can up the duty cycle, which will make the fan go faster. Now the reason we want to have a controlled fan is because if we just hook up these two fans directly to the 12-volt line on the system fan, these will go full power and be kind of loud. If we hook them up through a tip 102, we can actually control them with the PWM. And I've actually snipped the RPM sense line, and the system doesn't seem to care, which is a little weird, but okay. Probably has temperature sensors built into the APU, which is the CPU, GPU. But yeah, that's good because then we don't have to feed it a signal back because we can't. All right, so I'm gonna rig up a circuit using a tip 102 and these fans, and we should be able to control them just like the system controls this big one. Here's how I hooked up the dual fans. They're both 12 volts, so I wired them in parallel. Then we have the 12 volts coming from the console, that goes into the positive. The negative from the fans goes into the collector of a tip 102, which is an NPN Darlington transistor. This will allow us to switch the current on and off. Then the control line from the Xbox goes through a 1K resistor and then into the base of the tip 102. Finally, the emitter of the tip 102 goes into ground. So this tip 102 will act like the circuitry inside of the fan did. And the fans should turn on, and then also their speed will be controlled by the system. Let's try it out. There they go. These fans in general are going to run at a higher speed than that big one because they have to punch above their weight. Once we seal up the system, they should pull air off of this heatsink pretty well. I may also add a separate fan to the power supply over here. It actually has a connection for that as well. So these will go right here, and they will be controlled by the speed coming off of the Xbox. Double check the pulses coming off of it. Yep, same settings, 25 hertz, 27% duty cycle. Now I'm going to cut the aluminum base for the Xbox One S laptop. I want to use aluminum because, well, it's sturdy and it will also ground everything. So I'm going to cut it with a CNC machine, and then we can start attaching the 3D printed wall sections to the aluminum. I made a mistake while I was designing this. I forgot to leave room for the AC power jack. And of course, the best place to put it in this empty gap right here would hit the hinge. So now I have to cram it over here and miss this transformer. So I'm gonna have to manually cut a hole using my Dremel because that is far faster than reprinting these two pieces. Darn. All right, time to cut. All right, I'm gonna install the Blu-ray, or at least start fitting it. So it was designed with funky foam around the corners. So it should fit in right here. We have a mounting hole for the tab in the back. Since it was there, I figured I might as well use it. And then in front of the drive, we have these spacer pieces. So these pieces will go below and above the Blu-ray drive, leaving an opening for the disc, just like that. And then we'll have skin over this as well. So yeah, I'm just gonna glue this in place and make sure that it's flush with the rest of the case so that the skin fits correctly. So here's how we're gonna install the motherboard. I put a 3/4 inch long size 4 screw here, and I put a nut down onto it. Should be able to set the motherboard straight down onto it if the design worked. Ha 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 ha.
So you want to put all the screws in first?
Yeah, and then we'll set the motherboard onto them.
Okay.
Like
what could possibly
that.
go wrong?
Oh, lots could go wrong. So there's a little deviation with the thickness of the 3D printed parts. So what I'm going to do is add these 1/16 inch spacers that I laser cut. This will give us a little bit more clearance. Also, it was a little tight with the power supply. The power supply is the thickest part of this unit. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to glue these in place between the halves. So like over here, we've got that piece, and then the top half of the case will go over it. Then once we have all these in place, we can measure this thickness, which is top piece, spacer, plus bottom piece. And then we'll know exactly how thick to make the skin that we're going to wrap around the unit. Of course, the skin will be in 2 pieces as well. half of it will be attached to the bottom and half of it will be attached to the top. And then when you bolt the unit together, the skin should line up and we'll make a little decoration along the middle so you don't notice the crease as much. Well, I guess we'll draw more attention to the crease so it looks better. That's called a glamour line. So you make it look, like that on purpose. Because if we just try to butt the creases up, you're gonna notice a difference. But if we design a difference, then you won't notice it. Does that make sense? Sure it does. Okay, I cut this piece of skin. I'm gonna butt it up here to the indicator light. Okay, that fits good. Blu-ray drive looks lined up. Next question is around the back here. This is gonna line up to the fan. Bend it over here. It's about a 1/16 of an inch off. So my circle's about a 1/16 of an inch to the right. So, okay, well, not a big deal. I'll recut this and then it should be good to glue. Okay, so I cut this white plastic lid and we had to make a little bit of spacing underneath it for the wires and the hinges. So I just cut a secondary piece that is raised up a little bit and then I made a design to kind of hide it so it more or less looks flat. So yeah, it's looking pretty good. What I'm gonna do next is I'm going to start drawing what goes on the inside. So when you open it up, it's gonna have the silver color. So this plate here will probably be silver. So I need to design it, put in some vent holes and some other designs, and then I can put that flat piece here and glue it to these pieces and then start skinning the upper half of it. But yeah, we're getting closer. I'm just taking it one step at a time to make sure some things look good before I continue on to the next thing. I 3D printed this piece to go on the back. It has concavities for the HDMI ports, which stick out the back of the PCB quite a bit actually. So I'm just gonna stick this in the back, make sure it fits, and then I'll glue it in place. Then I'll laser cut a plate to go over it, and then we'll be pretty much done. Oh, all the blue tape is on the unit because I glued in the top of the lid. Yeah, cool, it fits. Let's do an overview of what's inside of this thing before we close it up. Power supply. We put a new power supply in this, 13.9 amps, so it can handle both the Xbox and the LCD screen. Blu-ray player, Wi-Fi module, hard drive, wireless controller module, and control panel. This is the driver board for the LCD and the heatsink for the APU. I did some tests. It's kind of ironic. The APU actually is one of the cooler parts. The power supply gets up to about 100 Fahrenheit. There's a few spots on the LCD driver board that get kind of warm as well. But that's why we have input and output fans. Okay, well, looks like we have everything we need. Let's close it up and test it.
Ben, your Xbox laptop has been going really well. Now, part of that is due to the fact that you were able to work on it over the span of a few months, as opposed to 1 week like we typically can for an episode.
Right, and when you're working on it over a longer course of time, you have more time to change things. Like if a part doesn't come in, you can just wait for it to come in instead of having to like swap out to whatever's laying around the shop. So yeah, it gave us a lot more breathing room, and I enjoy working on projects that way. Which got me thinking, I wonder if there's other projects from the past in the show that we could revisit and work on over a longer period of time to possibly create something that would be manufacturable that could come to market.
So we want you lovely people on our Element 14 community to vote in our poll to decide which long-term build we're going to do.
Here are the 6 choices we'd like you to choose from.
First is a seeing eye hat for blind people.
Yeah, when we did that project, we had 4 proximity sensors, and as you got closer or further from things, little rumble motors on all 4 sides would vibrate less or more. And we did a test, we walked around, and yes, you could definitely feel the environment. Maybe that wouldn't be useful for blind people, but maybe it would be. Most of the accessories I've seen mostly involve canes. So who knows, maybe it could be a good project. I wouldn't mind revisiting it because things that can help people are cool.
Another idea is the mini pinball game.
Yeah, that one was fun. And we had a lot of people asking if we could sell a kit of it so they could assemble it themselves. Now, like a kit of a full-size pinball would be pretty ridiculous, but a miniature one, that's probably feasible for someone to assemble. It might be a challenge though because there are a lot of custom 3D printed parts in it, but it might be worth exploring.
Oh, I really like this one. The live-action Minecraft blocks, which was an educational toy, kind of like Legos, but they would actually interact with each other.
Right, so inside of the game Minecraft, people use certain blocks to actually build working computers computers in the game, which is pretty insane. So what we did was we created 3D cubes of those same blocks that you could actually plug together with torches and whatnot and actually get the same logical functionality. So it was like Minecraft brought into the real world. And as I was making it, I was like, wow, this could be a toy. But then of course at the time, we just had to move on to the next episode.
Yeah, so that'd be really fun to revisit. So when you went to New Zealand, Felix was really excited because he finally got to do a project that he'd been wanting to do for a long time.
Right.
He built a recorder into a guitar, and so
Oh.
he would really love to revisit that. So basically, the idea is that you could pick up your guitar and have an idea for something that you'd want to record, and just, it would be right built into your guitar. You could push the button, hit record, play it, hit stop, and then it would save directly to an SD card.
Oh yeah, that would be handy. You wouldn't have to plug your guitar into anything. Nice. What's
Self-contained.
next?
Ooh, your can crusher.
Yeah, we've actually revisited this one once before, but I still believe it would be a good home consumer product.
Yeah, so rather than having some big complicated can crusher that just makes it easier to crush a single can,
Right.
we would make it a more automated system. So there would be a funnel or something where you could toss the can in, it would sense that there's the can, crush it itself, and then drop it into a bin.
Yeah, that would be handy. I would buy one if it was reasonably priced for the home. I mean, I think a lot of people would, so I don't want to give up on it, so I put it in there as an option.
I like it. And then this is one that was never done on the show, but I think it was a good idea. It'd be interesting to see if we could pull it off. It would be a wireless wire tracer.
For like home use?
Yeah, so the idea is if you have an outlet or a wire and you don't know where the other end is, you could hook one device to an end, and then you would take a second device and wirelessly connect it to another end. So your breaker box or just the other end of a wire.
Oh, so it could be like those fluke clamp-on sensors where you put a hook around something to detect the current or the voltage, and then, so you'd be non-destructive. You wouldn't have to like strip the wire.
Exactly.
And so you could set one up in one part of the house, then go to the other part of the house and probe around until you got a beep match.
So go on the Element 14 community on element14.com/TBHS and vote in our poll for our next big long-term builds.
We can't wait to get started. So one of the epiphanies we had during this project was the LCD screen. It's really hard to source LCD screens that have HDMI on them. Like you can get a monitor, but it's gonna have a bunch of bulky stuff in it. So Felix is like, hey, what about those screens you use for pinball? Because now we use LCD screens. And I'm like, oh yeah, I've got a bunch of those laying around. So I grabbed one, and then I found a driver board from eBay seller in China, and it took a couple tries, but we got the driver board to work with the HDMI coming off the Xbox One. Now granted, you're not gonna be able to watch 4K Blu-rays on this. Well, I mean, I guess you could, you just won't see the resolution. But yeah, it turned out pretty good. So this is a 1920 by 1080 display. Imhotep's priests. Oh, you have to download the Blu-ray player? Oh, for God! Really? This is how the world is now? Oh, here we go. Here's a scene with like shooting and dynamite. Oh, the encoding on this Blu-ray isn't super great. They're all upset because they just saw a Brendan Fraser movie. Yeah, horses, swords! It's like Battlefield 1. Oh, she's got the A10 Hunter. She's gonna kick everyone's butt. Yep, see? A10 Hunter, one-shot kill. See, the new movie's not gonna have any of this. It's not gonna have like dirt and swords and old guns and horses. It's just gonna be like technology and, you know, people being like, Oscar Mike, click, click, blah, blah, Tango, Charlie Cash. And this is just like, you know, swords. Oh, this part's great where he's got the dynamite. But the thing is, the dynamites can take like another 20 seconds to blow up, so why doesn't he just kill him? It's like, oh my God, he's holding dynamite. I can't stab him now. See, she got the A10 Hunter. She's like invincible. So the A10 Hunter is a shotgun that everyone uses in Battlefield 1 because it's super OP. Oh yeah, here's the Star Wars scene. It's like, well, I guess it's better sink into the dirt now. Well, there's no evidence of what happened to Poe Dameron, who was somehow ejected from his cockpit, but his jacket was left behind. Think about that in The Force Awakens. How would you fly this way? Maybe the jacket was snagged on something? Those crappy mummies. Well, that's all the time we have for today.
What else would you like to have seen us do to this Xbox One S laptop? Let us know on the Element 14 community on element14.com/TBHS.
You can also go there to read about other upcoming episodes, builds, and special events. We'll see you next time. Want to play some Xbox?
Yeah. Grab a controller.
Max just won't shut up about Unforgiven since he saw it on the plane from Germany. Whoa, that's cool. Skateboards. Oh, I had this dream last night that I was playing Contra and I was really terrible at it. And apparently I can't drive in a straight line without flipping my car. Now I'm gonna do. The Ben Heck Show is brought to you by Element 14, the electronic design community where you can connect and collaborate with top engineers from around the world. Join now at element14.com.